Just first of all, just quick introductions. We're going to start with Quincy here. Just you guys introduce yourselves. But yeah, we'll go there.
Thanks, sure thing. Yeah, I'm Quincy Raven, Managing Director of Aspire Global US, and we serve platform, managed services, sports, aggregation, pretty much the entire solution.
Hi, Scheri, COO of Agua, Caliente casinos in Southern California. We have 3 casinos. Right now, we are waiting for online and sports to take hold, and we're very excited about that, and we're in the process of preparing for that.
Hi, my name is Peter Murray. I haven't brought a translator, so I've got a Northern English accent. I work for a company called Veriff. We're sort of authentication technology in the AI facial biometric space. And I've done sort of 12, 13 years working with regulators and operators around technology and data.
Awesome. I'm Wolf. I don't know what it says up there. It probably says Jason. Everybody calls me Wolf. I am the founder and CEO of American iGaming Solutions, and we work with brick and mortar casinos to get them into online gaming, everything from vendor selection through pre-launch staffing and every step in between. So before we get started real quick, I'm just going to frame some of the opportunity right now that we do have in iGaming. Using public information and information from gaming commissions and some paid research and Google and Wikipedia, came up with a few things. And just to throw this out, in 2021, iGaming, just iGaming casino, not sports betting, that revenue was just under $4 billion. And it also coincidentally was the best year for brick and mortar gaming ever. So we're seeing that type of revenue on top of brick and mortar revenue. This year we're projected to be about $4.8 billion. And when we take a look at the 6 states that have online casino, and we look at their total population, and we look at the total population of those that are 21 and over, so we're taking out all the minors, and we average the revenue, or we take the revenue and we divide the revenue by that population. This is the key number out of everything I just said. $143 per person. So if you take your state's population, times that by 73.6%, that's how many people are over 21, and you divide the revenue right now, we're looking at $143 per person in your state. So it's a lot. It's a lot of money. So with that, I want to start with Quincy, and I really want to start looking at one of the biggest arguments that we see for why we would not want iGaming is the threat of cannibalization. Personally, we just haven't seen it. There's no evidence for cannibalization, with the exception of online poker, because as online poker players, I can play 4 tables simultaneously versus physically being there and only being able to play one at a time. Other than that, we don't see anything. But Quincy, as far as overall player value and cannibalization, what are you seeing right now?
Sure.
Is there any evidence?
So I don't have all my stats in front of me, so bear with me on the round numbers. So what we've seen here in the U.S., as Jason touched on, is record revenues without cannibalization. But in the players, the LTV of a player, when that player's that slot player with you today and they go with you online, there's actually a 20% lift. 20 to 30. So let's just conservatively call it 20%. So there's a 20% lift in revenue on those players for the lifetime value. And then outside of the baseline economics, when we look at the overall casino market of, call it 1,000 casinos here in the US, over half of those are tribal. And all of those casinos were all really built on what? Well, Start and Tribal is bingo, but they're slot machines. That is the player, that core demographic that they've been marketing to this entire time. So when you're looking at that player and that fear of cannibalization, just look at what is already precedent in multiple states. Granted, the majority are commercial only states, but if we look into Michigan, that is a tribal and commercial split. So it's an excellent example. There's states, we'll probably talk about a little later, that are going to be coming online that we can also example as well. But the short story is there's a 20% lift to that player because, maybe not any in this audience, but the operator, understand who that player is. You've been marketing to him for the last, 5, 10, 20 years, whatever that might look like. So it's a very easy answer. It's just a long conversation depending on who you're sitting down with.
Yeah, I just want to add something real quick to that. We see the same numbers too, 20% on average. The players that play online are worth 20% more when they come into your casino. And one of the reasons why is they've trained for the games now, whether it's a slot machine and they're on the slot floor and they're like, oh, I know that game. I played it for a quarter, but now I want to get the bonus in real money. I know the symbols I'm looking for. Or blackjack. I'm intimidated. I don't know really how to play, but I'm able to play online for 25 cents a hand or whatever it is. And the next time I go into the brick and mortar casino, I know the game now, and I'm no longer intimidated, and I'm going to sit down and try it. So that's why we're seeing that lift on the players that do play online. I do want to go kind of shift into the models that we have right now when we look at sports betting and how things are going to translate for iGaming. Right now, the main models are we're a national brand and we're going to come to the casino and pay you a bunch of money up front, and we're going to be the brand. We're going to use your license. It's more of a market access deal. We're going to give a few percentage points on the gaming revenue, single digit, and everyone's going to be happy. And then there's the other model, which is let's work with the platform provider that's going to help us retain our brand. So there's two schools of thoughts here on how to do this. Sal, I'd really like to talk to you or get your thoughts on what's the potential impact of a tribal organization and looking at long-term revenue and brand protection with both of these models. What are your guys' thoughts over at Agua Caliente?
Well, it's a great question, and there isn't an easy answer to that. Especially when you have some of the national brands that are approaching a lot of the tribes with a very large check, saying that we'll pay for the license fee. And of course, they're going to get that reimbursed. We're going to give you, we're going to take care of marketing. You're going to be affiliated with our brand. And, you're going to get 2 or 3% of the revenue going forward for 10 or 15 years. Well, you say, well, that's not very much, but that $20 million check is pretty significant. But then when you start running the numbers, you say, well, now wait a minute, that's $20 million, but that percentage could be something much larger, especially as time goes on. So there's the one thing that's great about tribes is it's not about this year or next year or even the next 5 years. It's about the seventh generation, their grandchildren's grandchildren. So they're not worried about the fast buck; they're worried about the long term. In addition to that, a lot of tribes, especially in California, and especially our tribe, have worked very hard and have invested a lot of money in their brand. We consider our brand to have great value. It has great value in the area with our customers. It has great value outside the area because we are a resort destination. So just to automatically associate with one of the national brands, that may help in an area that doesn't know about Agua Caliente. But what's that revenue actually going to be like compared to Southern California, which happens to include Los Angeles, where a lot of our customers come from. So that it's a question that we look at very closely every day to better understand how we're going to approach this, what steps we're going to take to protect our brand. Not saying that we wouldn't partner with a national brand, but it would have to certainly be the right kind of partnership with terms that protect revenues, long into the future.
What about the customer database? I mean, I'm assuming also that when you're pushing your database to a potential competitor in a few years, that's got to be a conversation you guys are having.
That's a huge conversation that we are having because, obviously our bread and butter is our database, and we've worked many years, to grow that database, have mature customers in that database. When we talk about brands, right, we're talking about building customer loyalty. We spend a lot of money building customer loyalty. We reinvest in our customers highly, and not just straight with comps or free cash play, but in many other ways. We conduct many events off property. We do a lot of things that are resort related, but not necessarily gaming related. So there's a big investment into that database that I don't know. We're certainly not going to write that contract and let that go away, without giving it some very careful thought and looking at the numbers.
Okay. Do you guys have anything else? I mean, Quincy, I'm sure you have something to say about it because you're a platform provider. Or with one, but just any thoughts on that, on the?
Sure. I mean, I know we're here to talk about, iGaming and what it means in tribal country, but when we, as Sal said, all the investment that goes into brand, some of the tribal casinos have been around for 30 years, some have been 20 or more recent. And we see some of the most successful in the country are these massive integrated resorts. And I live in Las Vegas. Some of these resorts that I go to that are tribal, they rival, if not eclipse, what we have in Las Vegas. And so when you look at that, there's of course the brand equity, component of it. But when we take a look at the two models, and rightfully so, of course I'm going to be more on the platform side, but it's not so much of, what are the services being sold or provided. It's philosophical, and it's taking a look at the tribe and what they've built and what they'll be generations from now, as you just alluded to. And a 5-year time frame may seem like a long time to some of us here in this room, but 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it's just not that long of a time when you look at it from a generation to generation perspective. And while I don't want to sit up here and pretend to be an expert on tribal, when you look at the generations from those who were, a part of the citizenship before the casinos, when they become the bingo halls, and then they become what we see today, you went from, sadly, in many parts of the country, an impoverished nations, some sadly still are, but you've seen great success. But the folks still remember what it was like, and being marginalized and things like this. Now, the cultural aspect isn't really the platform, or this isn't the platform for a cultural discussion, but coming back to brand and what has been built and what can be built in the future is important to maintain. Because if we take a very negative view of what we'll call it the B2C approach, or a national brand approach, the negative view or the negative consequence could be one that, yes, your data, as you just talked about, your data is being used, that you've collected over the last 10, 20 years, however long you've been doing it. It's being used to, yes, grow the overall pie. You picked up that big check, but then that single-digit percentage that you're getting year over year going forward may get to the point of your renewal phase where you, the operator, are potentially being commoditized when it comes up for renewal, where the data, they have soaked up the data, as I like to say. The data's been soaked up. Now they can take it to the next operator and go operate on their own brand, because that's what they initially sold in. So now if we go back to the platform side and really controlling and owning your own destiny, is there work in it? Is there expense? Yes, that's on both models. When you control your own destiny, select your partner, platform, all of that, whoever it may be, you want to look, or the tribe needs to be looking at that 5-year, that 10-year, that 15-year mark, that when everybody understands this iGaming market as it stands today, 5 years from now, it's going to be radically different. More states are going to be online. There's going to be far more gamification, and the consumer is going to be maybe not an expert, but have more expertise in gambling, in sport, in iGaming, et cetera. So it's imperative that the brand is maintained. And then also, I think some points were made on the previous, a few panels actually, of, where's the focus for that tribe? Because, and not to speak for Agua, but if Agua is built, you've got this huge brand and you've got the feeder cities that are coming in, for your players, your VIPs, to hand the keys over to a third party to say, hey, take it from here, I trust you, it's just a tough proposition.
Right, I think you're right, Quincy. And, we run the risk of entering into a partnership that doesn't end well. And let's not forget how many times that has happened in the tribal gaming world. That's left such a bad taste in many tribal gaming nations where they said, we don't want to do that. We don't even want to go down this path anymore because we've been burned so many times. I don't care who it is. I don't care how big they are. We've been, sometimes the bigger they are, the more chance they're going to get burned.
Yeah.
So that's why I think you see, more and more the tribes are looking to not necessarily partner with a national brand, but to kind of take this on themselves and promote their own brand, because it protects, their sovereignty, and it protects their interests going forward.
Yeah, I just want to throw this out just so for anybody here that doesn't know a lot about tribal gaming, in commercial gaming, like in Las Vegas, there's shareholders. In tribal gaming, the shareholders are the actual people. That's the community. And so this revenue is used for roads and schools and healthcare and every possible service. It's a sovereign nation, so everything comes from the gaming revenue. So if they get burned, it's real people suffer. So that's kind of why we're talking about this.
It was interesting. Richard Jules was on earlier. Sorry if that's working. Given for Richard a very succinct background to it, but the fact is you've got to understand that it is different. And I think your point there, Sal, was they take a long-term view. You can absolutely see the appetite for bringing in experience and talent and understanding, but it's just different. The short-term book is generally how the rest of the industry operates. This is just simply not the same.
Yeah.
So I think right in there you said it would have to be on your terms, and I think that's what sometimes the industry doesn't understand, because it is much longer-term investment, much longer-term view in the brand. And I think whichever way you go, buy or build, it has to be on your terms.
Definitely. So I kind of want to shift to, we were looking at the different models of the national brands versus platform providers and the tribal casinos actually creating their own brands. And there's been some, I don't want to say stagnant. Yeah, I'm going to say it. Things have been kind of stagnant lately. So there are some tribes that are actually taking the initiative and actually pushing forward without waiting for any state regulation. And so I definitely want to cover a few of those. New Mexico is one of them.
It's very interesting. Once they repealed, the legislation that prohibited sports wagering, we saw a lot of things happen very quickly, but not necessarily in the tribal world. You're starting to see it, more and more. But New Mexico took the path of saying, well, it's our land, we can do what we want on our land, and so they launched sports wagering. They launched iGaming, and it's interesting because not all of the tribal casinos in New Mexico did, but some did. And I know Wolfie and I were talking about this a little bit before the session. We said, well, who's going to stop them? There's no federal regulatory oversight anymore. There's no federal laws to stop them, and they're self-governed. So their own gaming commission isn't going to stop them. I'm sure they got their own gaming commission's approval to do this. And there's no state laws, prohibiting it because it doesn't apply. And so their compacts obviously are not written to in a way that prohibits that, and they're doing it. Now, to what extent and how successful, that remains to be seen. But again, what's interesting is that some are doing it, but not all are doing it. So in California, right, and this is where it becomes very interesting. Is that a take that we could kind of, follow? Is that a path we could follow? And, it's very unlikely because, first of all, California is very litigious. So there's likely to be, lawsuits from somebody about something. And, I think the way the compact is written, we would have to have specific approval to do that. But it's very interesting because you could make the argument to be able to do it on premise. You could make that argument, but I don't think anybody really wants to do that. And if, I don't know how many people are familiar with what's happening in California, but there's a number of ballot initiatives for this November. 2 have gathered enough signatures to be on the ballot. 2 others have not. One looks like they might get there. The other doesn't look like they'll get there. But the 2 that are very different, and they are competing. And it'll be interesting if one or both or none get approved. And no one right now can predict what's going to happen.
In California, so out of the 4 initiatives, there are 2, like you said, that are going to be on the ballot. And a lot of the hype around it is actually to try to actually confuse the voters so neither of them pass, which sucks. But it is what it is. Because each party, so in California, you've got the state lottery, you have commercial card rooms, you have the horse racing industry, and you have the tribal casinos. And they're all kind of fighting for who gets the rights to do all of this stuff. And the tribes right now, there are no casinos in the state of California unless it is a tribal operation. So that's kind of why this is important. I want to talk about, there's some very interesting initiatives going on, and by initiatives, I don't mean bills, I mean progress in Wisconsin, where the tribes are starting to take a look at, well, one of them is operating sports betting on premise. There's another one that will definitely be launching fairly soon, but they did have to go to the state and discuss it. But the point is, on their land, they're able to do sports betting on premise, and they're going to start moving forward with that initiative while they're waiting for the rest of the state to catch up and say, hey, we're going to do this statewide, which I think is phenomenal. I hope that more tribes and more states start doing this as well. They should be running this. They should get the head start while they're able to. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that or anywhere else you think you see that happening, but...
I'm not going to venture into that area. I think my area of expertise is outside of that. I think that the interesting thing, coming from abroad and seeing the complexity generally of regulation around here, and many times I'm glad I'm sat somewhere else, because trying to navigate all those complexities you've just mentioned is very difficult. But you guys have got the experience of doing it. You look at it and go, how sometimes you get things done is amazing.
Yeah.
One thought on that is, you mentioned on-prem or on-premise. So, when you look at the providers from a technology perspective, the technology that would be deployed for an on-prem solution should be the same technology that you would have for statewide. It really comes down to a matter of geofencing at the end of the day. So when we're in tribal country and we're talking to, different operators, there are more opportunities than obviously sport. I mean, sport is great. It's a great, way to get door turns on the retail side, and, it's got, good margin if operated properly. But when we look at iGaming and we look at the casino side of things, in tribal country, when you look at these casinos state to state, they have different classifications of games. Some are a bingo-based game, some are, a class 3 game. And being self-regulated, and then the idea of an on-prem really can make a lot of sense for certain operators. I'm not suggesting every single operator, because, the deployment of something like this, there's a cost to it. It's not over the top, but it requires the right economics and really the right time horizon if you're restricted to on-prem the entire time. But with that self-regulation, whether it's in New Mexico or California, Wisconsin, whatever state that we're talking about, there's an opportunity for the tribal operators to differentiate and to take a look at what's going on in the commercial space and say, hey, you know what? That seems to work. That might resonate with my players. Why don't I try it? Because I have that sovereign authority to do it. And so as far as part of that partnership that has been talked to earlier in the day, it's not just about tech. It's about the partner that you're sitting with that says, okay, I understand the online space, be it sport, be it iGaming and everything that goes with, but do I understand your land-based operation, your heritage effectively of who you are as an operator? And do I know how to work with your active database in the most efficient way possible? And efficient means cost-effective here. The most efficient way possible, and then acquire new players also as efficient as possible. Well, what they can do is bring them to the tribal land. They know the feeder markets, whether you're in Oklahoma and pulling out of Dallas, or you're Agua pulling out of LA, or, there's so many examples. You can still advertise to that exact same player base, get them in, get them comfortable with the concept of playing mobile and doing mobile wagering. And then when the state comes, because none of us can predict regulation, really, unless it's tomorrow maybe, we set ourselves up, or the tribal operator sets themselves up in a way that they are ready for that day one. And their players already understand that they've got the brand that they're already loyal to. They've got a place to play that is safe and obviously rewards them in the ways appropriate.
It's really valuable as you take the lessons learned from everywhere else. There's an opportunity here to look at what the rest, whether it's online or offline, has benefited or hasn't. It's an opportunity to sit back for a second and look at what is out there and what's more importantly better for your customers. You know them better than anybody else. Yeah, and there's data and there's tech and the solutions around that can do that. But ultimately take what's right for your own individual casinos or group or whatever it is. And I think that's the opportunity I think the tribe will have as they embrace this and take it out there, is just take what's right for you.
So I actually, that's a great segue into the next piece that I really want you to talk about, because your experience is invaluable for this. The second major, the first objection that I was talking about earlier is the cannibalization one. There's some fear around that. The second piece is iGaming is going to become a responsible gaming nightmare. And in reality, the checks and balances and the self-limitation and self-exclusion in iGaming dwarfs what happens in the brick and mortar industry. There is no slot machine in the United States that I am aware of that I can self-exclude from or limit how much I can lose. So, and we can use that actually to really enhance the customer experience. And Peter, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can use that type of technology to really increase revenue.
I think I've been coming here 12 years or so. I learned a long time ago not to come in here and go, this is how you do it elsewhere, because that just simply doesn't work. But I can tell you what's coming, because if you look at the responsible gambling elsewhere in the world, or safer gambling, that term around better understanding, better engaging, better protecting your players, that's coming one way or another. But from a tribal perspective, you know your customers better than most people. The online guys, the technology's there to help with that, is the way I look at it. And that falls into the you would say that, wouldn't you? Because I work in the technology world. But there's two things for me. I think there's regulation and there's the consumer experience. Trust and sustainability is the key thing. And I think for me, responsible gambling is a differentiator. It might not feel like that in the US at the moment. It definitely feels like that in other jurisdictions around the world. But actually, people are quite happy to give you their data as long as they feel as if there's trust between you and the customer, and building that up. And whether it's the technology that companies like us provide or that ability to understand your customer, I think that's the key thing. Regulation here hasn't really embraced it to this point, and there's lots of good initiatives going around generally. But that ability to genuinely stand there and say, I truly understand my customer, not just because I've met them, but because I know how they're behaving, I know what they're doing, I know what the technology and the data is telling me. All those things we've heard in the last couple of panels is generally what's going to differentiate it. People want to know they're in a safe environment. They don't feel like sometimes you get that in an online world. But all that support you can get from the technology that providers that are out there, that's there to help in an offline world. So, and we've seen that elsewhere, but we know that regulation's coming. So embrace it. You guys are probably ahead of that anyway with the engagement you have with them. But that ability to understand what they do is going to differentiate a brand or a tribal brand or a jurisdiction as we go forward, I think.
No, that's, if it's, forget about gambling, any site that you go to as a consumer, you want to know that you're having a safe experience. And I think using that as a competitive environment, like, hey, we're gonna take care of you.
But I think big brands sort of lost that somewhere down the line. I keep saying this, but the future of gambling on any level offline isn't going to look like me, right? It's that younger generation coming through. It's the people who are used to this kind of customer engagement. I'm coming across roles in user experience, which we would never have experienced 5 years ago when we were coming here. This is all about how you engage with your customer. They want to feel as if you understand them and deal with them. Yeah. And I think that's probably the biggest difference over the last 5 years and going forward for the next couple.
From the operator's perspective, it's, and having done this for more years than I care to admit to, problem gaming has been something that is just never addressed enough on the operator side. And it's something where, if there's any other operator, what we're talking about. When somebody runs out of money, everybody says, "Oh, what happened? What's going on here?" Well, it turns out that maybe the person had a problem, and they've exhausted all their revenues. Well, we find out about it after the fact, and what can we do? There's not a lot we can do. We do actually take some steps. I will say that. More so than a lot of other companies would probably do, as far as making sure that they're able to get through the next phase of their life, make sure that they're not coming back and doing it again, things like that. But it's always after the fact. It's so hard from a while it's happening or preventative standpoint. I think that iGaming is probably one of the few places that you might be able to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Listen, I just want to say to the next panel, I'm sorry, but there is a clock up here and we still have 20 seconds. Yeah. Does anyone have a quick question?
Yeah.
This question is directed towards Sal. Would you be interested in sharing your opinion of going to Class 2 mobile bingo, maybe as a segue towards mobile casinos?
Absolutely. So class two, we've looked at bingo, we've looked at actual, slots. There's not a lot of content available, so bingo is a viable option for sure. It is something that is important to us, and, it's right now restricted to tribal lands. And for many tribes, that is very limiting. However, for Agua Caliente, our tribal land is actually very interesting. In an effort to take advantage of our tribe early on, when they were doling out the reservation, they said, well, we're not going to give you contiguous land. We're going to give you basically a checkerboard pattern. So you never have more than basically one full square block in this valley, and you're screwed. Well, that valley, it was Coachella Valley, which is now Palm Springs, and the tribe has every other checkerboard parcel that they own. So one, it's nice for them because, they happen to own, or have that part of their reservation, land where the airport is, land where hotels are, land with this, a lot of different things. However, they've actually been phenomenal for the community, whereas they could have been very restrictive of what they've done. They've actually been very open with the way they work with the community. And that also allows them to do class two in a multitude of different locations, which is quite unique for probably any other tribe. So that is something that we're definitely interested in, we're currently looking at.
All right, because I'm sorry we didn't get to a bunch of questions. If anybody does have questions, I know that, because we like to talk, we'll be over somewhere. Please come and ask us whatever questions you have. Thank you guys very much for your time, and thank you to our panel.